Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rom.
And I'm Erin Feiner.
In our top story, Israel has returned fire into Syria. IDF ground troops came under fire from Syrian forces last week, forcing Israel to engage the attackers. The IDF fired a Tammuz anti-tank ground missile and successfully destroyed a Syrian military post. 2 armed Syrians were wounded. IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Benny Gantz, said, "We have witnessed a difficult reminder of the explosive reality along the border with Syria." He went on to say that the firing at IDF forces was enough to endanger our troops, which is why we had to attack and destroy the post where the shots were fired from. We will continue to act at this level to maintain peace. Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon released a statement saying, "We take the firing of bullets at IDF forces in Israeli territory very seriously. The IDF returned fire in line with government policy. Any violation of Israeli sovereignty and fire from the Syrian side will be answered with the silencing of the source of fire." He went on to say that the Syrian regime is responsible for every breach of sovereignty.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has officially apologized to Turkey over the 2010 Mavi Marmara flotilla raid, when activists violently clashed with IDF commandos during their attempt to breach Israel's naval blockade on Gaza. 10 Israeli soldiers were wounded and 9 terrorists were killed. The increasingly volatile situation in Syria prompted Netanyahu to call Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan to apologize for that incident. Netanyahu later issued a statement saying that it's important that Turkey and Israel, which both share a border with Syria, are able to communicate with one another, and this is also relevant to other regional challenges. He added that the recent visits of U.S. President Barack Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry created an opportunity to end the crisis. Netanyahu went on to say that Syria is crumbling and its massive stockpiles of advanced weapons are starting to fall into the hands of various elements, expressing his concern that terrorist groups will acquire chemical weapons. The apology to Turkey has been hotly contested not only across the Israeli political sphere, but the Turkish public. Yochanan El Rom has more on that story.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's apology was coldly received by the Turkish leader. In a statement, Erdogan said that the normalization of relations with the Jewish state would only occur after Israel lifts the blockade on the Gaza Strip and pays compensation to Turkey for the victims. Former Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman criticized the move, saying anyone who has seen the pictures from the Mavi Marmara understands without a shadow of a doubt that the actions of the IDF soldiers were in self-defense. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Benny Gantz said that the actions of the soldiers with regard to the Turkish vessel were professional and ethical. Any other army would have ended the incident with dozens of deaths. He did say, however, that it was good that the Prime Minister took action to promote ties with Turkey. It will have a positive effect on our security and strategic interests.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Kerry remained in the Middle East after the Obama visit to encourage the swift return to peace negotiations. After meeting with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Jordan, Kerry returned to Israel, where he presented Netanyahu with a package of demands that the Palestinians insist be met before they will return to negotiations with Israel. Those conditions include the release of 107 Palestinians imprisoned in Israeli jails, as well as building permits for land that is currently disputed.
The Norwegian Foreign Ministry admitted last week that they had presented imprecise information to their parliament about the Palestinian Authority's use of foreign aid to pay terrorist salaries. The Norwegian Foreign Ministry continues to blame the PA for providing false information, which it then delivered to Parliament. New information has come to light, clearly proving that more than 4,600 terrorists serving prison sentences in Israeli jails are on the PA's monthly payroll.
Members of the persecuted Christian community in Iraq say that they fear they will share the same fate as the Jews who once thrived there before being driven out by Islamic extremists. More than 900 Christians have been killed in Iraq since 2003, and 325,000 have fled persecution. According to the patriarch of the largest church in Iraq, Louis Sacco, churches have become endangered. He reported that only 57 of Iraq's 300 churches remain and that they are now targets. He added that before al-Qaeda took over control, there were around 1.5 million Iraqi Christians, while today there are less than 500,000.
Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, has started off the Iranian New Year by renewing threats against Israel. In his New Year's address to the Iranian people, Khamenei said that the Islamic Republic will raze Tel Aviv and Haifa to the ground. He accused the West of trying to cripple the Iranian nation with increased sanctions.
The same day that U.S. President Barack Obama delivered his recent keynote speech at the Jerusalem Convention Center, Palestinian terrorists fired a round of rockets from Gaza into southern Israel. Although Obama promised that Israel is not alone, he pressured Jerusalem to make concessions, saying that compromise is necessary to create a secure and lasting peace. The president described Palestinian Authority President Abbas as a true partner and said that Israeli occupation must end. Newly appointed Israeli Minister of Trade Naftali Bennett quickly released a statement responding to Obama's speech, saying that the results of Israel's latest withdrawal from Gaza were felt in Sderot, where 2 of the missiles hit. After expressing certainty that Obama's words were made out of sincere concern and true friendship, Bennett called for innovation in solving the conflict in the Middle East and said that one cannot occupy its own land and a Palestinian state is not the right way. Newly elected MK Ayelet Shaked said that even though Obama is a true friend of Israel, at the end of the day, Israel will have to absorb what she called the tragic and destructive results of the formation of a Palestinian state, and she called on the U.S. president, for whom democracy is a guiding principle, to respect that the people of Israel recently elected a government without a two-state solution as part of its foundation.
Many Israeli leaders were upset by President Barack Obama's refusal to address the Israeli Knesset. Member of Knesset Miri Regev said that Obama's speech was offensive to Netanyahu and that he should have spoken to the Israeli leaders in the Knesset. She said, "I was surprised by Obama's words about a Palestinian state. He did not mention the word Jerusalem, and that he said leaders must bring peace, as if Netanyahu doesn't want peace." She said, "I thought Obama arrived with a greater understanding of the diplomatic process between us and the Palestinians, but I see that he has not changed his stance, not about settlement construction and not about 2 states for 2 nations. And he decided that the young people must influence their leaders to put public pressure on the government in order to implement his agenda."
5 Palestinians have been arrested for a rock-throwing incident at Israeli cars that led to a tragic crash near Ariel 2 weeks ago, leaving a mother and her 3 daughters badly wounded. The youngest daughter, who is 2 years old, is still fighting for her life. A bus driver and several of his passengers were also wounded in that incident. And in a separate attack that same day, left a 10-month-old baby wounded. Palestinians have long used rock throwing as a form of terrorism and a means to wreak havoc on Israeli roads, including the murders of 25-year-old Asher Palmer and his infant son Yonatan near Hebron in 2011. A senior IDF officer at the scene described rock throwing as a terror incident like any other. IDF Brigadier General Chagai Mordechai said that Israeli security forces will act accordingly in all professional, tactical, and intelligence aspects to combat the phenomenon of rock throwing as popular terrorism. Former Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman expressed his hope that the newly appointed Defense Minister, Moshe Ya'alon, will finally change the military's rules of engagement and make rock throwers subject to the same treatment as those who fire live ammunition. Lieberman said that such a change will prevent Israeli soldiers and civilians from becoming targets for Arab criminals and prevent further tragedies. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful day on our rooftop studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Yair Sheleg, Research Fellow at the Israel Democracy Institute. Yair, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yair, tell our viewers a little bit about what is the Israel Democracy Institute?
Well, it's an NGO, a think tank, and also a do tank, which wants to improve the Israeli democracy, both by thinking, by making researches, and also by lobbying our analysis and make it like legislation.
So IDI is not just a think tank, it actually goes to the parliament and then tries to get it to implement it into law?
Yes, and we, especially in recent years, we do so much more than before, than in the past. We have a separate lobbying department which lobbies our researchers, our suggestions to the ministers, to the members of the parliament, and to the officials of the government to make it as I said, as a legislation and also as their policy.
Can you give us some examples of legislations that were passed that were based on your recommendations?
Well, the most important issue that we dealt with was not really fulfilled, but it was it improved the public discourse in Israel. It was about the constitution. Probably, as you know, Israel does not have a constitution from its establishment, and our institution tried to articulate an institution for the Israeli society. We didn't succeed yet, but the effort still exists. But by the way, we improved the discourse about the constitutional process in Israel, and maybe if at the end we'll have a constitution, it will be mostly because of our efforts.
Well, your department is specifically about religious affairs within Israel. You know, in a lot of countries there's a separation between church and state or religion and state, but in Israel there isn't. You know, religion is a big part of our country. It's really the reason we're here. What are some of the main issues that you deal with on the religious side of things?
Yes, well, basically I deal with, analyze the religious sector in Israel, both the Zionist religious sector and the ultra-Orthodox, and I try to analyze what are the most important developments within those sectors. I dealt with the meaning of the withdrawal from the Gush Katif, about what was the meaning about the general society and specifically about the religious sector. I dealt with the implications of the non-Jewish immigrants from the former Soviet Union on the Israeli society. I dealt with the relationship between and the attitudes of the most important rabbis in Israel towards democracy, such issues.
Well, one of the key issues in the government today is equal share of burden, is what they call it. It's getting ultra-Orthodox religious Jews to join the military, just like regular religious Jews do, just like secular Jews do. How contentious an issue is this, and how has your work been able to impact this issue?
Well, in this specific issue I didn't deal, but I have some thoughts about it. I think that the basic problem is that the ultra-Orthodox didn't decide yet whether they are isolated from the general society or part of it. And they are in a process of gathering and joining the General Society, but they have a specific problem about the army service, and the problem is that I think the General Society is not so much upset about the basic fact that the ultra-Orthodox don't serve in the army, as it upset about the gap between the fact that they don't serve but have a lot of demands economically and demands about legislation. So I think the basic idea that the General Society should demand from the Orthodox is whether to decide if you are isolated from the General Society, okay, you will not serve, or the part of you that want to be isolated from the General Society, okay, so you don't serve, but you don't have also special rights as a Torah students and other rights that you have. If you want to serve, if you want to be part of the General Society, then you have to take responsibility. And for the example of not taking responsibility is that in all those months when we speak about this issue, the ultra-Orthodox didn't suggest their own idea of what will be the balance between their demands and the general need of army service. So the basic idea, the basic demand should be that you, the ultra-Orthodox, should bring to the table your own ideas, and then we have to discuss, because your own ideas means that you take responsibility about the issue.
Yeah, you know, the whole situation is very interesting because the Orthodox religious community are some of the community that really most serves in the army, yet the ultra-Orthodox don't serve so much in the army. Some do, of course, yet they read the same Torah. So there's a divide, but it's interesting to where that divide comes from. There are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Well, many people, especially in the States, ask why in Israel there is no separation between religion and state, because in the United States, of course, it's a basic fact, this separation. And I think the basic idea is that the identity of the Jewish people is based upon the combination of nationality and religion from the ancient times. We unique in that combination in the modern era, in the Western modern countries, because this combination is not anymore at any Western country, but because we have an ancient identity of combination, which was not so unique in the ancient times. The Moabites, the Ammonites, all the ancient people have this combination between nationality and religion. The fact is that we keep this combination from the ancient times. This makes us so much unique, and because of that, we can't really make a full separation between religion and state.
Yair, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, Shining Light from Israel.
He left in the morning, and he said goodbye, and he went off with his friend Yosef Ishran, and they never came home.
He took a day off from school with a friend of his and came out here into the canyon to explore Israel, to explore his backyard. And he was trapped in this cave back there by 4 or 5 Palestinian terrorists.
They were beaten to death with rocks.
This is the cave where Kobe and Yosef were murdered. It's a place of great horror and great holiness at the same time.
I felt like I had no control and no understanding of the world. I felt that there had to be a God who had a much greater understanding than I could ever have, because I felt so limited. We were surrounded by people who took care of us physically and emotionally and spiritually, and were just there for us. And so all the love that people showed us gave us the power to feel that we could take this horror and cruelty and transform it into some kind of good in the world.
We were determined to create something out of the tragedy of Kobe's death.
We understood this horror of elut, of grief, the sharpness of the grief and the intensity, and the way it was like a wild animal. And we understood the way it hurt us and the way it hurt our children, and we saw that other families and children who had family members murdered by terrorists needed help, and that we could find a way to give them that help. So we got the idea to do a small camp for children who had relatives killed by terrorists in Israel. Now we have 600 kids in the camp.
It meets for about 15 or 20 days per year at 3 or 4 different times. These kids come back each time to their counselors and to their friends, so that they always have something to look forward to.
A lot of mothers, they don't give themselves time to grieve. They go right back to regular life. And even during the Shiva, they're already feeding other people and taking care of other people. And I got the idea that I should bring other women who'd suffered loss by having terrorists murder their children, bring them for 2-day healing programs. If you can find a way to put good into the world, then in a way you're bringing the dead person into the world, because all that good is created on the back of that person. Our camp is the happiest place in the world, because when you've hit the low of lows, also your high gets raised up. Like, you can reach an even greater joy because you know how great happiness is.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Yes, the tomb is empty. Jesus is risen. He is risen indeed. We are here at the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem, and earlier this morning hundreds of people came to this beautiful garden in order to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Last week we spoke about the death of Jesus and his centrality, the centrality of the cross. And we learned how Paul wrote to the church of Corinth that when he came to them, he knew nothing else than Jesus Christ and him crucified. But then Paul writes to the very same church. He says, if Christ is not risen from the dead, then our faith is futile. That means Paul gives uttermost importance to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And it's important also for us today to understand why this tomb indeed needs to be empty. Paul understood that the resurrection of Christ also assured his very own resurrection. Paul reasoned, if Christ rose from the dead, so also he one day will rise from the dead. And it was this resurrection hope which kept Paul going. It was like an engine in his life. To the church in Corinth, he writes, if in this life only we hope in Christ, then we are of all men the most pitiable. Many times we as believers, we look only on the blessings which we receive from Christ here on earth. But Paul understood there was a greater reality waiting for him. His life in ministry was not an easy one. Many times he was in dangers on the road, yes, even on the sea. He was beaten many times from Romans and sometimes even from his own countrymen, but he understood that it's worth it all, because he knew there is a resurrection waiting for him, which would transfer him to a new reality. He would receive an eternal inheritance from God, and this was the resurrection power which Paul believed in. And there is another aspect of the resurrection power of Jesus Christ which Paul understood. He understood that this power which rose Jesus from the dead is working within us as believers. It's this power which changes our lives, which makes us to the people which God wants us to be. But also it empowers our ministry. The ministry of the early church was the most powerful ministry. Many people got saved through their ministry. People got healed, delivered, even resurrected from the dead. And it's exactly this power which we need in our churches, in our lives today. And Paul understood that this resurrection power was crucial for every single believer and every single church he was ministering to. That's why he was praying in the following way for the church in Ephesus, but also for many more churches.
I do not cease to give thanks for you, remembering you in my prayers, that you may know what is the hope to which he has called you, according to the working of his great might that he worked in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places.
May the Lord bless you here from Jerusalem and empower you with his resurrection power wherever the Lord has placed you. God bless you.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.